There are moments when the soul speaks louder than any voice could ever reach. Moments when words are too small to carry the weight of what the heart holds. And in those moments, heaven bends closer, not to hear a sound, but to feel the vibration of a spirit that prays in silence. Before we begin this journey, I invite you to subscribe to the channel Jewish Wisdom, because here we uncover ancient truths from the Torah, the sages, and the mysteries of the heart that still breathe through time. This project lives through people who seek light beyond noise. And now, I ask you to write this phrase in the comments: "My silence is my prayer." Let that phrase be a seed between your soul and God tonight. Centuries ago, the sages of Jerusalem taught that silence was the mother of all prayers. They said that when the mouth ceases, the heart begins to speak. They called it tefillah belev, the prayer of the heart. It was not spoken to impress, not shaped by eloquence or ritual. It was a cry wrapped in stillness, a vibration known only to the one who formed it. In the book of Samuel, a woman named Hannah stood at the entrance of the sanctuary. Her lips trembled, but no sound escaped. Those around her thought she was lost in madness, yet the Eternal heard her as if she had shouted across creation. From her silent lips came the prayer that would birth a prophet, Samuel, and reveal that the truest faith does not shout, it whispers. From that story, Jewish wisdom drew an eternal principle. When you pray in silence, you are not hiding from God. You are hiding within Him. Silence is not the absence of faith. It is the language of faith perfected. Think about the world we live in today. Every second, thousands of voices fill the air. Opinions, demands, arguments, noise. Yet in that flood of sound, how often do we truly speak to the divine? When did you last close your eyes and let your soul talk without words? When did you allow your spirit to stand naked before God, without rehearsed phrases, without needing to be understood? The sages said that before creation there was silence. Before "let there be light," there was a breath, a pause so deep that all eternity fit inside it. That silence was not empty. It was pregnant with divine intention. From it came the Word, and from the Word came all existence. Silence, therefore, is not a void. It is the womb of creation. When you pray in silence, you return to that original space, the place before sound, where everything pure begins. Many imagine that God responds to the loudest cries, but the mystics of Israel knew a secret. He listens most intently to what cannot be spoken, because the divine does not need sound to hear. He reads the movement of your heart. He knows the weight of each unspoken tear. He understands the sigh you release when you cannot even form a sentence. Every silent prayer is a letter written in light across the heavens. Every heartbeat in faith becomes a rhythm of divine communication. The angels, it is said, are drawn to those who pray silently, because they recognize the language. It is the same stillness from which they themselves were created. Silence is not weakness. It is surrender. It is the moment when the ego bows and the spirit takes the lead. When words stop defending us, God begins to heal us. The sages taught that to be silent before God is to stand in the court of the king, and no servant speaks until the king invites. So the soul waits, not in fear but in reverence, because she knows that the king already knows what she came to say. When you stand in prayer and no word escapes, heaven already knows your story. It knows the nights you couldn't sleep, the fears you hid, the hope you buried. God reads silence like scripture. He sees what you cannot express. He answers what you cannot define. Sometimes silence is not chosen. It is born of exhaustion. When pain steals your language and faith becomes breathless, the silence that follows is sacred. Even Yeshua, Jesus, the Messiah, prayed in silence in the wilderness. He withdrew to the mountains, not because he lacked words, but because the noise of the world could not contain what the Father was whispering within him. That same pattern appears in Moses, Elijah, and David. Each found their deepest encounters not in crowds or songs, but in the quiet spaces where only God could be heard. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine standing in an ancient synagogue made of stone. Candles flicker. The scent of olive oil fills the air. Outside, the city hums with distant life, but inside there is only you, your breath, and the eternal presence that wraps around you. You open your mouth to pray, but the words dissolve. What remains is silence, warm, heavy, infinite. And in that silence, something stirs, not around you, but within you. It is peace. It is God. That is the essence of silent prayer, the discovery that God was never far away. He was waiting inside your quiet all along. The Hebrew word for silence, dumia, appears in the Psalms. For God alone my soul waits in silence. David wrote those words not in comfort, but in conflict. He had learned that silence before God was not absence, it was trust. When you wait in silence, you declare, I believe you are working even when I cannot see. That is why the silent prayer is the highest form of worship. It is faith without performance, devotion without audience, surrender without fear. Silence refines us. It strips away the unnecessary until only truth remains. In noise, we speak of God. In silence, we meet Him. The noise may move emotions, but silence moves eternity. The ancient rabbis described a mystery. When Israel stood before the Red Sea, Moses told them, "The Lord will fight for you. You have only to be silent." That moment defines the essence of faith, when you stop fighting with words and begin trusting with silence. Every miracle begins there, because in silence, you make room for God to speak, to act, to breathe new life where human strength ends. So when your prayers seem unheard, do not break the silence too quickly. Let it teach you. Let it cleanse you of the need to control outcomes. Sometimes heaven's delay is not rejection. It is invitation. The invitation to meet the eternal not in the noise of asking, but in the stillness of becoming. Listen carefully. There is a sound that no one else can hear, the sound of your spirit calling home. It happens in the pause between your thoughts, in the heartbeat between two fears, in the tears that never fall. That sound is prayer. It is the secret the prophets knew, the gift hidden in the Torah, the same energy that once moved creation from silence into being. So tonight, as you stand at the edge of your own Red Sea, facing what feels impossible, remember the command. Be silent and know. Because sometimes silence is not a pause before the answer. It is the answer. Breathe now. Feel the weight of that silence resting upon you like a soft mantle. Let the noise of your mind fade until all that remains is presence. You are not alone. The Creator is listening, not to your words, but to the intention behind your stillness. Those who pray in silence carry a mystery that the world cannot understand. They walk unseen, yet their prayers shape reality. They speak without voice, yet heaven records every echo. They are the ones who remind the world that the eternal does not need sound to hear, only hearts willing to be still. Remember this truth and write it again in the comments. My silence is my prayer. Let that confession seal your faith tonight. For in silence, your spirit becomes one with the breath of God. In the ancient language of the Torah, silence is not the absence of sound. It is the presence of awe. When the sages spoke of prayer, they used a word older than words themselves, tefillah. It does not simply mean to ask or to plead. It means to align, to judge oneself, to connect. And so, the moment you fall into silence, you are not doing less. You are doing the purest form of tefillah, aligning your soul with the heartbeat of the Creator. Hannah understood this mystery long before theologians tried to explain it. The story is found in the book of 1 Samuel 1:13. She stood in the temple of Shiloh, barren and broken, surrounded by misunderstanding. Her rival mocked her, the priest misjudged her, and society had labeled her failure. Yet Hannah refused to shout her pain. She stood still, lips moving without sound, and heaven wrote history in that silence. The scripture says, Hannah was speaking in her heart. Only her lips moved. but her voice was not heard. That one sentence altered forever how Israel understood communion with God. The rabbis taught that in that moment, the entire order of prayer was born. They called it Tefillat Hannah, the prayer of Hannah, and from it, the pattern of the Amidah, the silent standing prayer recited by Jews across the world every day, was modeled. Why silence? Because only in silence can the heart speak truthfully. Words are easily deceived by pride, but silence strips us bare before heaven. Hannah's silence was not emptiness, it was concentration. It was the moment when her entire being focused into a single beam of intention. In Hebrew, that focus is kavana, pure intention, the arrow of the soul. She aimed it directly at the heart of God, and the Eternal answered. The sages of the Talmud later taught, from Hannah, we learn that prayer must be from the heart, in silence, with lips moving but the voice unheard. In other words, the secret of answered prayer is not volume, but alignment. Centuries later, King David would echo her revelation in the Psalms. To you, silence is praise, O God in Zion. In Hebrew, lecha dumia tehillah. Those few words hold a paradox, the idea that silence itself is a hymn. How can silence praise? Because silence is the only language pure enough to approach the infinite without distortion. Imagine standing before an endless ocean. Would you speak, or would you simply stand in wonder? That is what the soul experiences when it faces its creator. Words crumble, silence worships. The mystical teachers of the Kabbalah went even deeper. They said that dumia, silence, is the bridge between bina, understanding, and chokmah, wisdom. Understanding analyzes, wisdom beholds. When the mind finally stops analyzing and begins beholding, silence appears. It is the space between knowing and being, the interval where revelation flows. To reach that state, one must quiet the noise of ego and fear until only awareness remains. That awareness is where God's whisper is heard. Every prophet knew this. Elijah learned it on Mount Horeb. After wind, earthquake, and fire, he heard the still small voice. That phrase in Hebrew, kol demama daka, literally means the voice of thin silence. It is one of the most mysterious expressions in Scripture, a voice so subtle that it is silence itself speaking. The sages said that this was the sound of the divine presence communicating without sound. Elijah covered his face with his mantle, for he realized that he was standing in the very breath of God. Silence is not the absence of speech. It is its perfection. Every revelation begins in silence and returns to it, just as creation itself began with a pause before the first, "Let there be." The sages taught that when God gave the Torah on Mount Sinai, the universe became utterly still. No wind, no bird, no sea, no angelic song, because only in perfect silence could the divine voice be heard. The human heart cannot serve two masters at once, the noise of the world and the word of heaven. That is why revelation required stillness then, and why it still requires it now. The Torah cannot enter a restless heart. One must first become still, and then the word finds its home within. This pattern repeats through sacred history. In the temple, the Levites sang their psalms, but the priests, those who stood nearest to the Holy of Holies, served in silence. The closer one comes to the presence, the quieter the sound. The high priest, entering the innermost chamber on Yom Kippur, spoke no words at all. He carried the silent confession of an entire nation. It was the deepest prayer ever offered, unspoken, yet fully heard in heaven. Silence also teaches a moral law. The Talmud says, if a word is worth 1 coin, silence is worth 2. Restraint doubles the value of expression because it preserves holiness from being wasted. Words spoken before their time lose their power. Truth revealed too loudly loses its purity. Therefore the mystics counseled, speak less, reveal less, listen more. The brightest light can only survive in quiet spaces. When we pray aloud, our words rise through the air, carried by breath. When we pray in silence, the energy of the heart travels directly through the soul, spirit to spirit. The Zohar calls this kind of prayer the flame that has no smoke. It burns without residue, leaving nothing behind but light. Yet modern life fears silence. We cover every empty moment with noise, conversation, or screens. But the soul still remembers the sacred quiet of Eden, the world before words when God walked with humanity in the cool of the day. To surrender to silence is to walk back into that garden, where communication was no longer verbal, but heart to heart. In the wisdom of the Kabbalists, silence is also the channel of mercy. They taught that divine compassion flows from Atik Yomin, the Ancient of Days, whose first revelation is silence. Mercy does not argue, it descends. When you choose to be silent instead of defending or contending, you imitate that mercy. You allow grace to flow through you. This is why true forgiveness is often born only after quiet. Words may justify, but only silence can cleanse. Hannah understood this mystery. When the priest Eli accused her of drunkenness, she could have protested, but she did not. Still rooted in that inner stillness, she answered gently, "I am pouring out my soul before the Lord." The Hebrew shofecha, to pour out like water, reveals the essence of genuine prayer. Not performance, but release. The moment she emptied herself, heaven filled her again, with life, with Samuel, whose name means heard by God. She was heard because she was silent. From her example, the sages learned that the prayers of the righteous sustain the world. Their silence holds the universe together. Somewhere, unseen, someone prays without sound, and that quiet intercession keeps chaos at bay. Silent prayer becomes architecture in the invisible realm, foundations of peace and mercy that the world does not see but constantly stands upon. Even science now confirms what the ancients already knew. When the mind enters silence, the brain's rhythms harmonize, the body's patterns align, inner order emerges. It is as if every note of the human being tunes itself to the same divine key. The mystics would say this is the moment when the soul stops resisting creation and begins to flow with it. In silence, we do not escape life. We return to its true rhythm, to the music that has played since the beginning of time. Thus the sages declared, silence is not emptiness, but union. It is the meeting point of heaven and earth, the still flame within all sound, the unseen bridge between mercy and wisdom. The world began with silence, revelation unfolded within it, and redemption will come through it again. For when words cease, awareness awakens, and in that awareness, the eternal speaks once more. The Hebrew letters of Dumiyah, D-V-A-M-Y-H, contain within them the word dam, blood, and Yah, the name of God. The hidden message is profound. Silence unites the life force of man with the presence of God. It is the fusion of the physical and the divine, the heartbeat of creation meeting the stillness of eternity. And perhaps this is why the Messiah himself often withdrew to lonely places to pray. The Gospels record him leaving crowds, climbing hills, and praying alone at night. He was not escaping humanity. He was returning to the silence from which all healing flows. There, in that timeless communion, he spoke no words that the world could hear, yet heaven answered with miracles. Every healing, every act of compassion was born from those silent nights of alignment. This is the essence of the spiritual revelation. Silence is not an absence of communication with God. It is the highest form of it. In silence, you cease to send and begin to receive. In silence, you move from petition to participation, from asking for miracles to becoming one. The sages called this devakut, cleaving to God, the state in which the soul becomes so united with the divine that there is no longer I and thou, only oneness. When you enter silence with that awareness, you stand in the same current that once flowed through the prophets. You become a living sanctuary. The world outside may roar, but within you the temple stands unshaken. That is why every great prayer in Jewish tradition begins and ends with silence. The Amida is recited silently. The Kaddish begins after a pause. Even the Shema, the greatest declaration of faith, ends with a breath of quiet, as if to say, "Hear, O Israel, and now listen beyond sound." So when your lips move, but no voice escapes, remember Hannah, remember Elijah, remember Sinai. You are walking in their footsteps. The same God who heard them hears you. For the Eternal does not dwell in the noise of desperation, but in the stillness of surrender. This is the secret revealed through the Torah, the prophets, and the sages, that the most powerful prayer is not the one the world can hear, it is the one heaven cannot ignore. And when you next enter your own silent prayer, know that you are not whispering into emptiness. You are standing where heaven and earth meet, where the first word was born, where the breath of God and the breath of your soul become one eternal sound, so quiet that only eternity itself can hear it. There is a difference between knowing a secret and living it. Many people understand the beauty of silence, yet few allow it to become their dwelling place. They admire peace, but they rarely build it inside themselves. The truth is that silent prayer is not a moment. It is a discipline, a rhythm, a way of walking with God through every hour of the day. When the sages spoke of prayer, they were not describing a ritual to be performed at dawn and dusk. They were describing a state of awareness. To live in tefillah is to live in continuous conversation with the divine, even when the mouth says nothing. Every breath, every pause, every act done with pure intention becomes a word of that unspoken dialogue. The first step is learning to create inner space. Modern life compresses the soul. It fills every second with information and noise. But the spirit cannot breathe where there is no pause. The Torah begins with the letter Bet, an opening that symbolizes a house. The sages said that creation begins only when there is space for God to enter. In the same way, prayer begins only when you create a space within yourself that is not filled with anxiety or noise. Start your morning differently. Before touching your phone, before speaking to anyone, sit still for a few moments. Place one hand over your heart and whisper within, Mode ani lefanecha, I am grateful before you. Let the words fade until only gratitude remains. Feel that silence wrapping you like a tallit of light. In that instant, your day is already aligned with heaven. You have begun it not with noise, but with remembrance. Silent prayer is not limited to holy places. It travels with you. While walking to work, waiting in line, or driving through traffic, you can enter that same inner sanctuary. You do not need to close your eyes or fold your hands. You only need to remember that God is listening even when you are not speaking. The rabbis called this Da'at Hashem Bechol Derachecha, knowing God in all your ways. Every path, every pause can become a gate to the divine. When anxiety rises and thoughts begin to race, resist the urge to fill the air with pleading words. Instead, return to the breath. Inhale deeply, remembering that the Hebrew word for spirit, ruach, also means breath. Exhale slowly, releasing every burden. In that exchange, you are performing a silent confession, a quiet surrender. You are saying without words, into your hands, I release what I cannot control. During times of sorrow, the silence of prayer becomes a balm. The Psalms teach, be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. Waiting is difficult because it feels passive, but spiritual waiting is the most active faith of all. In waiting, you declare that God's timing is perfect. In silence, you learn that not every prayer needs an answer. Some need transformation. The answer is not always what changes around you. Sometimes it is what changes within you. Practice also means protection. Every time you pause before speaking harshly, you are praying silently. Every time you choose to listen instead of argue, you are creating space for divine wisdom to enter the conversation. The Talmud says, whoever guards his tongue, guards his soul. But beyond the tongue lies the heart. Whoever learns to still the noise within guards their peace. Before major decisions, when fear and doubt battle inside you, close your eyes for a brief moment. Do not rush to reason or to ask. Simply rest your thoughts in silence and imagine the light of God surrounding the question. Often clarity rises not from logic but from stillness. The voice of intuition, what the sages called Bat Kol, the daughter of the voice, speaks only when the world inside you is quiet enough to hear. Shabbat itself is the embodiment of silent prayer. It is the day when creation stops striving and simply is. Lighting the candles at sunset, you step into sacred stillness. That peace is not only external, it mirrors the rest God took after creation, a silence full of satisfaction, of completion. Every week, you are invited to taste that silence again, to stop creating and begin dwelling. It is a rehearsal for eternity. The Hasidic masters taught a beautiful practice. Between one word of prayer and another, listen for the silence. They said that the spaces between words are holier than the words themselves, because they carry the breath of the infinite. Try this during your next prayer. Speak less. Let the pauses stretch. Notice how your awareness expands. Soon you will discover that the silence begins to pray for you. If you wish to transform your relationship with God, start by transforming your relationship with quiet. Noise demands, silence receives. Noise impresses, silence reveals. Noise prays to God. Silence prays with God. And when you begin to live that way, you will find that even in the middle of chaos, an unshakable stillness remains inside you. That stillness is the echo of Eden. Now write this in the comments, not as decoration, but as declaration. In silence, I find my strength. Let those words anchor your faith tonight. Imagine the world if every human being practiced even 1 minute of silent prayer each day. Wars would lose their appetite. Fear would dissolve in empathy. Words would regain their sacredness. Because silence teaches you to listen not only to God, but to others. When you have heard heaven, you will hear the pain of your brother more clearly. When you have tasted peace, you will no longer feed on conflict. Silent prayer, then, is not escape from the world. It is service to it. It is the invisible labor of the soul that keeps compassion alive. The rabbis said that every person who prays silently for another creates an angel of mercy. Those angels travel faster than sound, weaving unseen threads of healing through the earth. This is how your quiet moments contribute to cosmic balance. Even failure and sin have their place in this silence. When you fall, do not rush to speak guilt. Enter stillness first. Let God's gaze rest upon you without defense. The moment you stop explaining, forgiveness begins. The psalmist said, "When I kept silent, my bones wasted away, but then I acknowledged my sin." True confession is born when silence gives birth to honesty. It is not the sound of remorse that saves you, it is the courage to be still before truth. You can practice silent prayer anywhere, in a crowded bus, in the kitchen, under the stars. The outer world does not need to change. Only the inner posture does. Close your eyes for a few seconds and imagine the divine presence near you, as close as your breath. You do not have to invent words, you only have to remember. Remember that you are seen, known, and loved. That remembrance alone is prayer. As you master this way of being, you will notice something astonishing. Your speech itself becomes more sacred. Because silence purifies the mouth, what emerges afterward carries weight. People will listen differently because your words will have been tempered in the fire of quiet. They will no longer come from impulse, but from insight. You will speak less, but what you say will heal. In time, you will realize that life itself is a conversation between God's silence and yours. The moments you call coincidence are often replies to prayers you never voiced. The peace you feel unexpectedly is the divine answer arriving quietly. The opportunity that appears just when you stopped forcing the door open, that too is heaven responding to your stillness. Remember the lesson of Elijah. The voice of God was not in the storm or the fire, but in the thin silence that followed. You must become like that silence, gentle, steady, open. And as you do, you will hear guidance not as sound, but as certainty. You will walk through life knowing when to move and when to wait, when to speak and when to remain still. This is the fruit of silent prayer, inner discernment. So let your practice be simple. Each day find 3 moments to be silent before God, at dawn, before a decision, and before sleep. Let those moments frame your day like parentheses of peace. They do not have to be long, just sincere. In those few breaths, your soul will realign, your mind will clear, and heaven will whisper through the quiet. And if you feel tempted to give up because the silence feels empty, remember this truth. The seed always lies in silence before it breaks the ground. Nothing grows without hidden time beneath the soil. Your silence is that soil. Every time you enter it, something unseen is forming. When the season comes, it will bloom, and you will understand that the silence was never empty. It was gestation. This is the practical path of silent prayer. It is not escape, not ritual, but relationship. It turns ordinary life into sacred conversation. It transforms waiting into worship and breathing into blessing. The world may not notice the change, but heaven does, because while others shout for miracles, you are learning to become one. And so, as the light fades and the day closes, remember to breathe one last prayer that needs no sound. Feel the presence near you, listening in the quiet. The same silence that began creation now fills your room. You are not alone. You are home. Write once more in the comments to seal your understanding. In silence, I find my strength. For that strength is not your own. It is the echo of the eternal within you, speaking in the language that created the world. The sacred, unbroken silence. There are moments when silence becomes a doorway, not the silence of emptiness, but of presence, the kind that breathes. When the world quiets for just a second and you realize that heaven has been near all along. A man once came to a rabbi burdened by sorrow. "Rabbi," he said, "I have prayed for years, yet heaven seems deaf. I speak, and nothing changes." The rabbi looked at him gently. "Perhaps," he said, "it is not heaven that is deaf, but your heart that has been too loud." He then led the man outside, under the stars, and asked him to close his eyes. "Listen," the rabbi whispered. The man listened. The wind moved through the trees. A dog barked in the distance. Then silence returned. "Do you hear it?" the rabbi asked. "Hear what?" "The space between the sounds. That is where God speaks." The man began to weep, not because he understood, but because he felt. In that instant, his prayer changed forever. He stopped trying to make God hear him and started listening for God instead. That night, without words, peace descended like dew. The silence itself had become his answer. Every soul must pass through such a night. The night when you stop fighting to be heard and begin allowing yourself to be found. It is the threshold of faith, the place where true prayer begins. Because prayer is not about moving heaven. It is about being moved by it. When Hannah prayed silently, she did not ask for a son merely to end her pain. She wanted to give birth to meaning, to participate in God's story. And that is what silent prayer does. It transforms desire into purpose. It turns need into calling. The more you surrender, the more heaven can entrust you with its secrets. In every generation, there are souls who sustain the world with silent prayers. They are not seen on platforms or pulpits. They are mothers watching their children sleep, elders whispering thanks before dawn, workers who pause for a heartbeat before entering their day. Their prayers have no audience but the eternal, yet their silence keeps the earth from collapsing under noise. You may be one of them, without even knowing. Silent prayer also heals relationships. Words can build bridges, but they can also wound. When you hold another in silence before God, you are loving them at the level of spirit. You are saying, "I choose peace over pride." This is why Yeshua said, "When you pray, go into your room and close the door." He was not speaking of walls, but of the inner chamber of the heart where reconciliation begins. If you could see what happens in the unseen realm each time you close your eyes in faith, you would never again think silence is empty. Angels move, fears dissolve, time bends, heaven draws near. You may feel nothing, but eternity is being rewritten in that stillness. So tonight, do not rush your prayer. Let the silence linger. Let tears come if they wish. They are a language, too. The Creator who designed speech also designed silence, and He understands both perfectly. Now, write this in the comments, not as ritual, but as response. God hears my silence. Let it be your witness and your reminder. Before we close, I want you to remember this truth. Your journey through silence is not isolation. It is initiation. Every prophet, every mystic, every soul that found God walked through quiet valleys first. And what they discovered there was not emptiness, but fullness beyond sound, the presence that never leaves. If this message awakened something within you, and you wish to go deeper into these teachings, ask for the Jewish Wisdom eBook in the comments. It was created as a companion for seekers like you who long to understand the mysteries of the Torah, the prophets, and the hidden language of the heart. Silence began this story, and silence will end it. But before we close, breathe once more. Feel that sacred pause, the same pause that existed before light. Within it, the eternal listens. Within it, you are home. Because in the end, it was never about being heard. It was about learning to hear the one who never stopped speaking. And his voice, still, small, eternal, whispers your name in every moment of silence. God hears my silence. That is the final prayer. That is the seal of faith.